Hi, Michael. Good evening.
Hey,
Thank you so much to be my guest. So today's topic is about how can you quickly improve your English and then adapt it to business English, your CVs or cover letters, and perhaps in interviews. So that's very interesting topic. So guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave your comments and also let me know your time zone. Are you in the States or are you in anywhere? So thank you so much for joining. So Michael, maybe let's start with like I just quickly introduce about yourself and how can we how did we connected? Is it okay?
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, great. So basically, I think one day because I started in December 2019 for all my career related contents, and then one day, hey, I received Michael's comments on my post, and then oh, I see he's also doing career coach, and then it's interesting because I was quite afraid of people commenting me because last time I have one person. He said he's an English teacher or something, right? And then he circled what's my mistake in my post. And then, hey, is Michael is doing the same thing? I don't know. But anyways, Michael is quite nice, and then we have a chat, and then we also know that we have common friends like Brian, James, and then so that's why I invited Michael to here and talk about his English. How can you help about the CVs? So is there anything you want to add, or you want to formally introduce yourself or anything?
Yeah, nothing to add. That's how we met. Like I found Keith online, and we had a lot of connections in common, and we've chatted back and forth over the past few months, and this is just like, oh, cool, it'd be fun to try something new. So a little background about me. I guess I should talk about that. So I am actually I did not grow up thinking I want to be an English teacher. Like I started out. Long story was like I wanted to be a communications major, and I was going to be a writer. But then I got a corporate job so I could pay bills, and I went up that path, went up all the way up to a six-figure job in consulting. And then, one day I found a life coach, and at one point he starts talking about like how do you travel overseas, and he talks about you can teach English. And it's like, oh, that's awesome, right? Because I want to
Yeah.
go to Japan, and so that's how I fell into teaching, and then it just kind of skyrocketed from there. It just became like not just my thing I do as a job, but became my business.
Okay, okay, cool. So because today's topic is English, you can learn quickly, but you know, you need to learn a long, very, very long time. It's a very tough process. For me, it's just in Hong Kong, as I always mentioned, we started in kindergarten, like
Yeah,
have 20 years experience, but people like me is not native, right?
correct.
We are bad in, using English as well. So how can you quickly improve your English? What exactly do you mean? Why you want to, for today's topic, right? Is it just attract people or do you have any methods to make it happen?
Right. So there's actually a few recommended resources I can go into as well. But yeah, it's possible to quickly improve your English. But here's the caveat. Like, I'm not suggesting that you become a native fluent speaker. What I
Hmm.
am suggesting is that you can improve your English quickly enough so that you can start getting job offers and improve and actually perform better on the job. Right. That depends on who you are and where you are in your situation. Like some of my clients are job seekers. They came to the U.S. from overseas and they need to get a job quickly. It's like they don't need to know like all the grammar rules, all the
Mm,
formalities, uh,
mm,
but they do need to know enough English so that they can carry a conversation. Likewise, I also have clients who actually have jobs. Like I have a client who's a sales rep, and she was having gaps in knowledge. Like how do I like she knew how to sell, she knew her skill, but she didn't know how to say it in English. And so small nuances there. So it's definitely possible to learn English quickly. And it's not just learning English fast. Like there's a book called Fluent in 3 Months, which talks about how you can learn pretty much any language within 90
mm.
days and get to a conversational ability within or a 15-minute conversation. And it's something I've been going through right now. Like I know a little Japanese, so konnichiwa, watashi mo namae wa Michael desu, wa genki desu ka? America's doko desu.
Okay.
Let's see. So I know a little Japanese. I've been able to go out and have conversations
Yeah.
with people. I don't know. I can't tell you like what the past tense and the present tense is. I can just tell you that when I have to say something, I know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think one of the artists in Hong Kong, he didn't how to read and write, but he speak fluently. So because it's just listen and then speak and but so that means you don't need to have any certificates like IELTS, TOEFL. You don't need anything, right? That
Exactly.
so you just go out and business English. So what was the difference between traditional learning English as you said, vocabulary, tenses, and all those things, other than just business English, go straight. So what's the difference?
Right. So there's a couple of nuances with business English. So some business English programs and trainers will say business English from the immediate beginning. So some programs will say even if you don't know any English, we can teach you functional language English. So we can just teach you just enough English so you can go in and do your job. And this business English is pretty broad. So as an example, one of my mentors actually teaches hospitality English, which is a subcategory of business English, and she literally teaches non-native English speakers in the U.S. who don't know any English. She teaches them everything they need to know within a 6-week program, so that they can speak enough English to do their job and communicate with customers. Right. The business English that I teach is actually a little bit more specific. So instead of just teaching like functional English for the job, which I do teach that, I also teach um, advanced levels of English, making sure students have the nuances they need. So some of my students, for example, I'll give them a task, like I'll say, deliver this presentation in English, and I'll ask
Mm,
them how they will explain it, and they will say like, um, I'll give them a chart and just say it got bigger, right? And it's like, well, what are some other ways to explain that? And I start giving them more vocabulary for them to use, so that way they can um, start talking a little bit more professionally in the workplace.
okay. But in terms of applying to job search, cover letters, CVs, maybe interview. So how does it work? Any successful case to share or anything you would like to, advise the job seekers?
Right. So with the business English, how it applies to like the job search, for example, again, so it's a combination of vocabulary and specific terms and phrases like idioms, and how it applies to job seekers and how they might benefit from business English as opposed to general English is that when you're learning a language, you're just learning the bare essentials, right? So, for example, Japanese, konnichiwa is hello in Japanese. But what if you need to get more nuanced, right? Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. That's how business English comes in when it comes to things like resumes. So, for example, like a typical resume will say a highly motivated something. They'll use
Yeah.
pretty basic vocabulary, but any decent coach or recruiter will tell you like, no, you got to use more powerful action verbs. So that's an example of how he used business English in terms of resumes. Same thing with interviews. Like anything you learn for your resume, you can pretty much apply to your interview. Is to say like I'm an assertive individual. Here's an example of when I took initiative on the job, right? And so we would use business English for that.
Okay. But I mean, for job seekers, just say, hey, I just want to get a job, right? For example, if my CV just gets through the door of HR and then I get hired, then I don't need to take care about, the tenses and vocabularies. I just even know line by line, every details. I don't need to be correct, right? I just want to get the door. You understand
Exactly.
what I mean?
You don't necessarily need to know every single nuance. You just need to know enough to get into the door, like you just said. Like so, for example, you don't necessarily need to know like present continuous tense. Like I have a demo
Mm-hmm.
I just put out on like for A1 to B2 students, but that's a very it's not required. Like it's not like when you go to work, they're going to ask you like what's the difference between present continuous and present
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
uncontrollable, like all sorts of grammar things. They just want you to know that when they talk to you, that you understand what they say. So I don't know if you had this experience, but I used to when I was working in corporate, I had to manage a staff augmentation vendor overseas, and one of the biggest problems we had was communicating to them and giving them instructions. And they would come back and say, here's how we understand your instructions. And without fail, until like we learned how to communicate better with them, we found that they struggled with our instructions because we were speaking and writing in English. We were we just assumed a lot of nuances. And so we realized that we had to simplify our process as much as we could, like with simplicity things, which is okay if you're a staff augmentation vendor. When you're a job seeker, you can't do that. You have to play at the level that they expect you to play.
Okay, okay. So anything specific things that you normally advise the candidates to use in your CVs, for example, is it everything in past tense or I think it's a bullet point short sentences. So how does it really your teaching style to advise the people?
It varies from student to student. So, for example, it's true like with the resume, like typically we just do past tense, right? So, it's everything in the
Yeah.
past tense. Achieve this, develop this, trained that. That's very simple, very straightforward. I don't typically talk about tenses because I know most students don't understand tenses. So I just say, instead of doing it like this, do it like that, right? And so Actually, if you like, I could actually share my screen and show you a quick demo lesson.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because I also saw some of the videos. You also have like fill in the blanks. You can use this word. You can use the vocabulary. It's all really interesting, and that's really help. Yeah.
Okay, so let me do that real quick.
Yeah, no problem. So that's that means the job seekers who can see what's the best way to adapt the English. And yeah, today's topic is how to help you to write your CVs or interviews and how you can do in job search, because English may not be your first language. So we invite Michael, to teach you about that. Yeah.
So
So
here we
is it?
go.
I need to click the. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a lesson that one of the lessons we do is creating a resume. So the
Yeah.
objectives here are to outline common vocabulary, right? So
Okay.
where traditional career coaching, we would go into more like, let's talk about your achievements and let's talk about what can you do for a company. Like business English is more like a step down from that because we know that's pretty intense and pretty advanced. So we got to start with the basics. So we'll ask more simple questions and do some warm ups, and we'll give you some exercises. Here we go.
Yeah.
So here's
Assignments.
right. So let's if we have time, we can actually do this right now. And if you're watching, you can participate. So
Yeah.
what I'd like you to do here is try to match the verb with its meaning. So for example, the verb carry out. What do you think it means? Do you think it means to work with others cooperatively to produce something, to create or build something, to lead or be in charge, to execute a plan or strategy? And this tells me a lot about a student because a student can be C1, they can be fluent, they can be very well informed, but they'll be missing tons of vocabulary because look at all the words that are being used here: cooperatively, uh, lead, execute.
Hmm.
Like some people may not know that, and
Hmm.
this is where we find out. Where this is where like, oh wait, we have to go back a few steps before we even touch business English because you may need to go back to learn more vocabulary. So, for example, carry out. Does anyone want to take a guess?
Is it to execute a plan or strategy?
Yep. Very good.
Then I'm a best student.
Good question. Go start for you. Sweet. How about collaborate? What do you think that means? To work with others?
Work with others, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Let's keep going so we don't waste too much time. So we've got some more verbs. Let's see what else we can do. Here's a way to practice with
Hmm.
sentences, right? So how about this one? We are blank an experiment to find the best solution. And here, not only do you take the verb, you got to
Hmm.
conjugate it. So like it's not just going to be one of these words. You got to use the correct tense. And again, this will test. And now that we find that a bit more because you don't need to know every single tense, but you need to know enough when you're talking to someone that you know how to conjugate. You don't need to know like how to answer a test, but you need to know like unconsciously how to say it. So I can't, for example, tell you why a certain word has to be in a certain tense because I'm a native speaker. Like I have learned this unconsciously through repetition, but I can tell you what the correct verb tense is. So
Yeah.
let's try it real quick. So for the first one, we are blank an experiment to find the best solution.
Is it established?
Is it we are established? Let's see. We are establish an experiment. We are establish an experiment to find the best solution.
Hmm.
Actually, no. It's it's carry. This is best gets cool. So
Yeah, carry on.
it's carry out, but we got to conjugate it because we're not. It's not we are carry out. It's present continuous. Carrying out an experiment to find the best solution. All right, so now what
Okay.
we find out is like, okay, now we know we probably need to revisit some of the grammar tenses so you can get some familiarity and practice with that. And again, not so that you can pass the test, but just so you can practice because
Yeah.
the key to learning English fast or learning any language fast is not knowing the grammar rules consciously and being able to recite them. It's being able to perform unconsciously, being able to know let me stop my screen real quick so I can back in.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there. Oh,
So that's why I got a message from other people like circling all my grammars and all those errors because I cannot answer the question.
I wonder what happened to my camera, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an
That's
example.
great.
Like, there you go. So you can trying to hide my room, but it's okay. It is
Okay.
we'll work with it.
It's your typical curtain, yeah. All your videos are using that.
Yeah, I try to like keep it professional because some people like
Yeah,
get upset when they see like, oh, you're actually doing it in your bedroom, and it's like, I
yeah.
get it.
And
Okay.
keep your secrets behind the room.
Yeah, I don't want you to know what kind of things I'm into. You know, don't want you to see my posters or anything like that. Like God
Yeah,
forbid, see like what kind of music I listen to. Right.
yeah. So this is very useful, right? Thank you so much. So, but I mean, how about interviews? So, if for example, if to go to interviews, everything is instant. We can't prepare. So, any advice for them if you are not native speakers?
So two things, in my opinion. First of all, like it's true that you can't prepare for everything.
Yeah,
But the first thing that I do with my students is that we practice, we do mock interviews. And what they also do is they write out the answers to the questions. So we know, generally speaking, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you know about the company? Why do you want this job? So you can practice the essentials, right? They might ask you more behavioral based questions like, tell me about a time you had a difficult experience with a coworker. And so we'll practice that. The other thing is the most important thing I think with my students is being comfortable with not knowing the answer. And what I mean by that is that in certain cultures, what someone will do is if they don't know something, they will say yes or they'll say okay,
yeah,
but then
yeah.
they won't. And then they'll make a mistake. So, as an example, I was actually talking to a prospect recently, and I asked him a question. All I did was ask him like, "What are you making right now, and how much do you want to be making?" And instead of answering the question, he with the monetary amounts, he told me, so I'm currently an engineer and I'm working in this country and I'm not trying to get overseas and that's my goal. And I understood what happened was he didn't understand, but to a native English speaker in the U.S., if someone asks you a question like how's the project going along, if you can't answer the question, they're going to think it's suspicious. Like in America, especially, we don't like that. We're a very direct culture. We prefer to have direct answers. So what I have to teach my students is assertiveness training as well as being comfortable with letting go and being comfortable with not knowing the answer. So one thing that I'll tell them to do is like, how can I um, ask for clarity? So as an
Yeah.
example, I'll just give them like, so you don't understand something. One of my students is Priya. So Priya, what you can do is say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat that, or can you? I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you frame that another way? Which I think you may have noticed before the call. You and I were talking, and I asked you questions I didn't understand. That's a skill, like learning, um, being comfortable with not being correct, with making mistakes, and just asking for help. Like a lot of students need help with that.
Okay, understand. Yeah, thank you so much. But I just want to know because last time I have a LinkedIn Live with Brian Golov is that hey he is non-recruiters. So same as you. I mean, you are teaching English. Of course, you can teach. I mean, what's the verbs to use, the tenses and everything is really related to English. But how did you get started to give career advice or career coaching other than your core business? I think is English, right?
Right. So it's my core business is primarily business English. Like literally, like the main thing I sell, the main things I teach my students is primarily business English. So that's what we focus on. Um, how I got so the question was, I just want to make sure I understand, was how did I get started into teaching
Doing extend your business to like
career coaching?
career coaching. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it just kind of happened that way. So when I started teaching English a couple of years ago, a lot of my students would ask me questions like, how do you write a resume, and how do you
Oh,
write an email, and what do you do in this situation? Like one of my students said something that this may not sound like a business English thing or a career coaching thing. I think this falls under executive coaching. But she said, Michael, I came to work today and my coworker made fun of me for not being social, right? And if you study executive coaching, it's very similar to life coaching. It's about dealing with thoughts and feelings and how to address, how to be a better performer at work. But there's a lot of crossover with executive and life coaching. And so that's how I fell into it. I just kind of like, I started out as teaching English, and people were asking me like, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I was like, okay, well, might as well add that to my repertoire.
okay, interesting. Because I also think I noticed from your post, and then maybe you also recommend post comments in my post that hey, you can search information in Google. You can do everything by yourself. So and also you will share your personal stories, for example, your previous work and all those things. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? Because you also mentioned that you Google information in doing career coaching. Yeah.
Can you so make sure I understand the question here? The question is, um,
The question is, you mentioned that people can use Google's to find information, and then obviously you also mentioned your previous role, maybe it's N or whatever, and then you also Google to that. So just wants to know more. Yeah,
oh, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, is how to use Google for your job search. Is that about it?
something like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like this, I think at the highest level, that's how actually got two six figures without hiring a career coach and without getting an MBA or anything like that. Was I went on Google and just started going Google like, what's the best way to answer questions? What's the best way to get a promotion? I got to give credit where credit's due. There's a guy named Ramit Sethi from I Will Teach You to Be Rich. If you don't know who he is, go follow him right now. He is. I am eternally grateful for him because because he taught me one thing in one of his blogs, which is he calls it front loading the work. And this concept is that in order to perform better, it's like you do the work before you do anything else. So if you want to ask for promotion, you talk to the manager months before the performance review. You say, hey, so my boss was here. I said, here, listen, like, what are the things I want to know what I need to do in order to get promoted? What are the things that you're looking for? Right? And that was free. No one gave me career coaching advice on that. I didn't pay for that. It's something I found on the blog. And because I did that, and because I found out what my boss thought was valuable, 6 months later, she sent me a text saying, "I want to promote you to team lead." Right. So that's
Okay.
how you can use Google to like get better with your career, and like how to do that to find the information you need in order to improve yourself. Um, while we're on the topic, like how can you use Google to find free resources or like, to improve your English, right? So like my favorite channel by far that I recommend to all my students is something called English Pod 101 and Business English Pod 101. It's a YouTube channel. They have tons of content you can watch just to practice, just to get exposure to the language, just to get back exposure to the terminology that we use in corporate America as well. Um, you can also find other resources. So, for example, Grammarly, I found um, accidentally through Google, and it's a free resource that you can use. Just go through and edit your resume right away. So, I have a lot of students say when they say, can you audit my resume?" All I do is I put it through Grammarly and I say, "Hey, you got X amount of grammatical errors. Go fix it." And then I say, then we go from there. But if you fix that, like you see, there's tons of ways you can find free resources online and be resourceful using Google.
Okay, understand. Yeah, so actually, I want to know how many programs that you can help your students. I mean, you obviously have a lot of programs, and I think we talked before. You have most likely your students is from the U.S. So how can you help some other people in different world? I mean, maybe uh, India, Hong Kong, Asia. So yeah, any programs that are suitable for them?
Any program specific for other countries. So my
Yeah.
is done online, so I do have students internationally as well. Like it's done just like this, like a live session, just like I showed you before the demo lesson. Like that's actually how a lesson would work. Like we'd log in, we do the lesson. I'd ask you to do the exercises and see how you're doing, just like we did just a few minutes ago. I have most of my students are based in the U.S. and they're students who are trying to learn their English for jobs in the U.S. But I've had students all over the country. I had all over the world. I had a student from Myanmar who's a DevOps student who needed help with getting jobs. So we worked on his English there. This is all done online. Um, Trying to think if there's anything else that we could talk about.
Yeah, any sharing successful stories or tips or anything, you can quickly improve your English, anything.
Right. Yeah. So a quick tip right now that you can use immediately is to go to the local library. That's where I started teaching English for free. And I could tell you a quick success story. I had one of my first students was a man named Vitali, who was a vice president of information technology in Moscow, and he came to the U.S. because he wanted to change. And when he first came to the U.S., like he knew very little English, and he didn't have the behavior of the next day. He was like hunched over, he was really shy. I'm sorry, he didn't understand half the things someone would say. He was very scared. But after 3 months of working with me, doing just conversational English, he went from being very shy to now leading conversations
Wow.
my other students. Um, so let me think if there's other stories too. I have another student recently. His name is Yakuba. He's from Africa. He asked me to review his LinkedIn profile, and just all I did was give him a few suggestions and improvements. Again, the Grammarly thing. Again, Grammarly is amazing. Like that'll solve most of your problems, in my opinion. After he went through the updates, he messaged me a couple of weeks ago saying he started getting interviews after he made the updates to LinkedIn. Like, so
Wow, that's
that's
good. That's good.
do. Like you can do that on your own with Grammarly for free. Most of the problems that you have, like most students I find, especially with their resume, 80% of the problems can be fixed with Grammarly. It can be fixed by
Yeah, I'm using Gravity as well.
okay.
So, any other things you would like to share, or anything you would want to? Maybe I don't know whether any people have any comments, or just try to answer any questions.
Okay. Looking at the live comments, but I can't see anything for some reason. I'm not logged in.
Oh,
That might be why.
okay, okay,
You have live
no
comments.
worries.
Tell
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
So, any other things you would like to say, or you have any questions to ask me? Just
Yeah. Let's see. Any other comments? Yeah. Trying to think. There's something else I want to say. The big thing
yeah,
is I highly recommend for every student, like, go find yourself a placement test of some kind. There's tons of free tests online. Again, just with Google, you can just go online, quickly find self-study placement test because a lot of my students that come to me, they didn't realize they needed help with English because they learned English, right? They were successful in their home country. They were successful in the U.S. on the job. I have a case study with one of my students who is in her 30s, and she started out in the U.S. as an IT like desktop engineer, and she did okay. She kept getting promoted, getting promoted. One day, she becomes project manager, and then one day during her career, she's asked to lead a presentation, and she bombs it. And in fact, it was so bad that the big boss said that she will never present again. And that's when she came to me and said, "Hey, Michael, I need help with my English because I couldn't speak at all during my presentation." And that's why I think it's so important. What we found out with her, it was really there were significant fossilized errors. These are things where people make a mistake and they don't realize it's a mistake. They just keep doing it over and over, and that was part of the reason why she couldn't be understood when she was presenting, is because she was speaking broken English. There was enough English to get to a certain point, but again, like I said earlier, like um, if you're working at six-figure levels and you're working for an employer, like they expect you just to speak like a native. They don't have patience. They don't have time to try and understand. Like it's just how it is with executives. Um,
yeah. That's why you speak so fast. And perhaps this is your another business line you can extend to presentation skills, public speaking, or English.
yeah, yeah. I've been actually getting voice coaching from Roger Love, who is a I don't know if you know this. He was the guy who taught Bradley Cooper how to sing for A Star Is Born. So I'm going through his programs. I went on stage to get coaching from him. And I speak fast. It's just like that's just what I do. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily like you would to slow down.
Yeah, and also because of coronavirus, so basically what you did about online teaching, everything is really good. I mean, and all your students are everywhere in the world. And that's good. English is also common language. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
yeah.
know that in most countries, like I know Taiwan, for example, they want English, and by 2030, they're trying to make English like one of the main languages because they're trying to attract more businesses to Taiwan.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah. Good. It's all good. Yeah. So you have to learn English from your young age, and then if you have any questions, any problems, if it just comes to Michael, and that's it. Any other things?
no, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, and be my guest. So thank you again. Yeah. Talk soon.
Talk soon.
Thank
Thank
you. Bye bye.